The sound of her father's voice sealing the deal echoed through Josephine Anderson's mind like a death knell as she stood in the dusty parlor of their modest ranch house, watching him shake hands with a man she had never seen before in her 20 years of life. The year was 1878, and in the sprawling territory of Arizona, women were still considered property in many ways, though Josephine had never imagined her own father would treat her as such until this very moment when he announced she would be leaving with the stranger come morning, traded like livestock for 200 acres of prime grazing land and a herd of 300 cattle. Her mother had died 2 winters ago, leaving Josephine to manage the household while her father grew increasingly desperate to expand his failing ranch outside of Casa Grande. The drought had been merciless, and debts had piled up like tumbleweeds against a fence post. Still, Josephine never thought it would come to this. She stood frozen, her hands clenched in the folds of her worn calico dress, unable to speak as the portly stranger with tobacco-stained teeth leered at her like she was already his possession. "She is a good worker," her father said, refusing to meet her eyes. "Strong and healthy, can cook, clean, and manage a household. You will be pleased with the arrangement, Mr. Carmichael." Josephine felt bile rise in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but where would she go? This was the only home she had ever known, and women alone in the Arizona territory did not survive long. The wilderness was unforgiving, and towns were few and far between. She had no money, no relatives willing to take her in, and no skills beyond those expected of a rancher's daughter. That night, she lay awake in her small bedroom, staring at the ceiling and listening to the coyotes howl in the distance. Her belongings were already packed into a single trunk at the foot of her bed. She thought about her mother, about the stories she used to tell of falling in love with Josephine's father when they were young, before hardship and loss had turned him into this hollow shell of a man who could barter away his only child. Morning came too quickly. Josephine dressed in her best traveling dress, a dark blue cotton that her mother had sewn for her years ago. She braided her long auburn hair and secured it with the silver clasp that had been her grandmother's. If she was being sold like cattle, she would at least maintain her dignity. Mr. Carmichael arrived with a wagon just after dawn, accompanied by a younger man who helped load her trunk. Josephine noticed this man immediately, not because he was remarkably handsome, though he was, but because he looked at her with something resembling sympathy rather than appraisal. He was tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking shade of hazel, shifting between green and gold in the early morning light. "This is my ranch foreman, Vincent Emmett," Carmichael said gruffly. "He will be driving us to my property. It is a 2-day journey north." Vincent touched the brim of his hat in greeting, and Josephine gave a small nod in return. She refused to say goodbye to her father, climbing into the wagon without a backward glance at the man who had betrayed her. As they pulled away from the only home she had ever known, she felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. She would not give her father or Mr. Carmichael the satisfaction of seeing her break. The journey was uncomfortable in more ways than one. Carmichael spent most of the first day discussing his ranch, his cattle, and his expectations for his new acquisition. He already had 2 wives, he explained, both of whom had proven unsatisfactory in various ways. The first had run off 3 years ago, and the second had died in childbirth along with the baby. Josephine felt her stomach turn at every word, but she kept her face carefully neutral. Vincent drove the wagon in silence, but she caught him watching her several times in the small mirror attached to the driver's seat. His expression was difficult to read, but there was definitely concern there, mixed with something else she could not quite identify. They made camp that evening near a dried creek bed. While Carmichael set up his bedroll and fell asleep almost immediately, snoring loud enough to wake the dead, Vincent started a small fire and began preparing coffee and beans. Josephine sat on a flat rock nearby, unsure what to do with herself. "You should eat something," Vincent said quietly, handing her a tin plate with beans and hardtack. "It is a long way still to go." "I am not hungry," she replied, though her stomach contradicted her with a loud growl. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Your stomach disagrees." Josephine took the plate reluctantly. "Why do you work for a man like that?" she asked, keeping her voice low so as not to wake Carmichael. Vincent was quiet for a moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "I needed work and he offered it. I have been at his ranch for 3 months now. The pay is decent, and I am saving money to buy my own land someday." "So you are willing to overlook his character for money?" The bitterness in her voice was impossible to hide. "I did not know about this until 2 days ago when he told me we were making this trip," Vincent said, meeting her eyes directly. "If I had known what kind of man he truly was, I would have moved on already. What he is doing to you is wrong. Yet here you are, helping him do it." Vincent flinched at that, and Josephine felt a small, mean satisfaction at landing the blow. But then she saw the genuine distress in his expression and regretted her words. He was not the enemy here, just another person caught up in circumstances beyond his control. "I am sorry," she said after a moment. "That was unfair. You are just doing your job." "No, you are right to be angry," Vincent replied. "This whole situation is vile. I wish I could do something to help you." "Unless you have 200 acres of land and 300 cattle to trade back for me, I do not think there is anything anyone can do," Josephine said with a hollow laugh. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the crackle of the fire and Carmichael's thunderous snoring. Finally, Vincent spoke again. "What will you do when we reach the ranch?" "What choice do I have?" Josephine replied, staring into the flames. "I will do what is expected of me and try to survive. Perhaps I will get lucky and he will die of apoplexy in his sleep." "Do not say that," Vincent said, though there was no real reproach in his tone. "Things might not be as bad as you fear." "You do not believe that any more than I do," Vincent sighed. "No, I suppose I do not." The next morning they continued their journey north into rougher terrain. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all red rock formations and scattered sagebrush, with mountains rising in the distance. Josephine had never traveled this far from home before, and under different circumstances, she might have found it exciting. Around midday, they stopped to water the horses at a small spring. Carmichael wandered off to relieve himself behind some rocks, leaving Vincent and Josephine alone for a few precious minutes. "Listen," Vincent said urgently, moving closer to her. "When we get to the ranch, stay away from Carmichael as much as possible. Keep to the kitchen and the main house. There is a Mexican woman named Rosa who cooks and cleans. She is kind and will help you find your footing." "Why are you telling me this?" Josephine asked, searching his face. "Because you deserve better than this," Vincent said simply. "Because what is happening to you is wrong, and I cannot just stand by and pretend otherwise." Before Josephine could respond, they heard Carmichael returning, and Vincent stepped away quickly. But something had shifted between them in that moment. A connection forged in shared understanding and unspoken sympathy. They arrived at the Carmichael Ranch late in the afternoon of the second day. It was larger than Josephine had expected, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals filled with cattle. Despite the size of the operation, everything had a slightly neglected air about it, as though the owner cared more about accumulation than maintenance. Rosa turned out to be exactly as Vincent had described, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She took one look at Josephine and immediately understood the situation, clucking her tongue in disapproval and ushering the younger woman into the kitchen. "You will sleep in the room off the kitchen," Rosa said in heavily accented English. "I will show you where everything is. Mr. Carmichael, he expects dinner at 6 o'clock every evening, breakfast at dawn. He is not a patient man." "I understand," Josephine said quietly. "You are a brave girl," Rosa added, patting her hand. "We will get through this together, see?" That first week passed in a blur of cooking, cleaning, and trying to stay out of Carmichael's way. The man was every bit as unpleasant as Josephine had feared, prone to sudden rages and unreasonable demands. He had not yet forced his attentions on her beyond leering glances and inappropriate comments, but Josephine knew it was only a matter of time. Vincent, however, became an unexpected source of comfort. As the ranch foreman, he took his meals in the main house, and Josephine found herself looking forward to those brief interactions. He always thanked her for the food, asked how she was managing, and treated her with a respect that made her want to weep from sheer relief. Sometimes, when Carmichael was out checking the herds, Vincent would linger in the kitchen, helping Rosa chop vegetables or mend tack while chatting with both women about inconsequential things that made the days feel less oppressive. "You are a good man, Vincent," Rosa said to him one afternoon about 3 weeks after Josephine's arrival. "Not like that pig you work for." Vincent glanced at Josephine, who was kneading bread dough at the counter. "I try to be decent, at least." "You succeed," Josephine said softly, not looking up from her work. The simple exchange seemed to please him, and Josephine noticed the slight smile that crossed his face as he went back outside to work. But the fragile peace could not last. One evening, after Carmichael had consumed most of a bottle of whiskey with his dinner, he cornered Josephine in the hallway outside her room. His breath reeked of alcohol and tobacco, and his eyes were glazed with drunken lust. "You have been here nearly a month now," he slurred, reaching for her. "Time you started earning your keep in all the ways a wife should." Josephine tried to sidestep him, but he was faster than his bulk suggested. His meaty hand closed around her wrist, and she cried out in pain and fear. "Let her go." Vincent's voice cut through the moment like a blade. He stood at the end of the hallway, his posture deceptively relaxed but his eyes hard as flint. "This is none of your concern, Emmett," Carmichael growled, not releasing Josephine's wrist. "Go back to the bunkhouse." "I said let her go," Vincent repeated, taking a step closer. "Now." Something in his tone must have penetrated even Carmichael's drunken haze, because the older man released Josephine with a shove that sent her stumbling backward. Vincent was there in an instant, steadying her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are overstepping, foreman," Carmichael said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "I could have you horsewhipped for interfering." "You could try," Vincent replied evenly, "but you will not touch her again tonight. Go sleep off the whiskey." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, and Josephine held her breath, terrified that violence would erupt. But finally, Carmichael spat on the floor and stumbled away toward his own bedroom, cursing under his breath. As soon as he was gone, Josephine began to shake uncontrollably. Vincent guided her into the kitchen where Rosa was waiting, having heard the commotion. The older woman immediately put the kettle on for tea while Vincent helped Josephine into a chair. "Thank you," Josephine whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you for stopping him." "You do not need to thank me for basic decency," Vincent said, his jaw tight with barely suppressed anger. "But this cannot continue. He will try again, and next time I might not be nearby to intervene." "What else can I do?" Josephine asked desperately. "I have nowhere to go, no money, nothing." Rosa and Vincent exchanged a long look, and Josephine could see them communicating silently about something. Finally, Vincent spoke. "There might be a way out of this, but it would require you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" "What are you proposing?" Josephine asked, wiping her eyes. "I have been saving money for 3 years now," Vincent explained. "Almost every penny I have earned since I started working cattle drives. I have enough to buy a modest piece of land and start a small ranch of my own. I was planning to wait another year, but given the circumstances, I think it is time to move forward with those plans." "I still do not understand what that has to do with me," Josephine said, though hope was beginning to kindle in her chest. Vincent took a deep breath. "Marry me. If we get married, Carmichael's claim on you is void. You would be my wife legally, and there would be nothing he could do about it." Josephine stared at him in shock. "You barely know me. Why would you do this?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Vincent said simply. "Because you deserve a chance at a real life, not this nightmare. I'm not asking you to love me or even to truly be my wife in all ways. I am offering you freedom and safety. What you do with it after that would be entirely up to you." "He would never allow it," Josephine protested, though she wanted desperately to believe this could work. "He would not have a choice," Rosa interjected. "There is a priest in Casa Grande who would marry you. Once it is done, it is done. Carmichael, he is a bastard, but even he would not go against the church." "When?" Josephine asked, looking between them. "Tomorrow," Vincent said firmly. "We leave at first light before Carmichael wakes. It is about an 8-hour ride to Casa Grande. We can be married and back before evening." "He will be furious," Josephine said. "Let him be furious," Vincent replied. "His fury is a small price to pay for your freedom." That night, Josephine packed a small bag with her few belongings, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and hope. Rosa woke her before dawn, and they crept out to the barn where Vincent was already saddling 2 horses. "Take the brown mare," he told Josephine quietly. "She has a smooth gait and will not tire easily." They rode out as the sky was just beginning to lighten, pushing the horses hard to put distance between themselves and the ranch. Josephine kept expecting to hear Carmichael or his ranch hands pursuing them, but the landscape remained empty and silent except for the sound of hoofbeats and the wind whistling through the rocks. As the sun climbed higher and the day grew hot, Vincent and Josephine stopped to rest the horses and share the food Rosa had packed for them. Sitting in the shade of a rocky outcropping, Josephine finally found the courage to ask the question that had been plaguing her. "Why are you really doing this, Vincent? And please do not tell me again that it is simply the right thing to do. You are giving up your carefully laid plans, spending your savings, and risking Carmichael's wrath. There must be more to it than abstract morality." Vincent was quiet for a long time, staring out at the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "My mother was in a similar situation when I was a boy. My father died when I was 5, and she was forced to marry a man who treated her cruelly. I was too young to help her, too powerless to do anything but watch. She died when I was 12, broken in spirit and body. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help a woman in such circumstances, I would not hesitate." "I am sorry," Josephine said, reaching out to touch his hand. "That must have been terrible for you." "It was a long time ago," Vincent replied, though his eyes were shadowed with old pain. "But when I saw Carmichael dragging you into that wagon, looking at you like you were just another head of cattle he had acquired, something in me could not stand it. And then as I got to know you these past weeks, seeing your strength and dignity in the face of such injustice, I knew I had to act." "You are a remarkable man, Vincent Emmett," Josephine said quietly. "I am just a cowboy trying to do right," he replied with a slight smile. "Now we should keep moving. We still have several hours to go. They reached Casa Grande in the early afternoon, both dusty and exhausted. Vincent led them directly to the small Catholic mission at the edge of town, where Father Miguel had served for the past 15 years. The elderly priest took one look at their faces and seemed to understand the situation without need for lengthy explanation. "You wish to be married?" he asked gently. "Yes, Father," Vincent replied. "As soon as possible." "And you, child?" Father Miguel turned to Josephine. "You enter into this marriage of your own free will." "I do," Josephine said firmly. "More than anything, I do." The priest nodded slowly. "There are usually certain formalities, a waiting period, witnesses to gather. But I sense this is an urgent matter, and I have learned not to stand in the way when God's hand is clearly at work. Come, let us proceed." The ceremony was brief but moving. Vincent had no ring to offer, but he took Josephine's hand in his and spoke his vows with such sincerity that she felt tears prick her eyes. When it came time for her to respond, she found herself meaning every word she said, even though this had started as a marriage of convenience. "I, Josephine Anderson, take you, Vincent Emmett, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to honor and respect you, to stand by your side through whatever may come, for as long as we both shall live." "I now pronounce you man and wife," Father Miguel said, making the sign of the cross over them. "May God bless your union and keep you safe from harm." As they stepped out of the mission into the bright Arizona sunshine, Josephine felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was no longer property to be traded or owned. She was a married woman, protected by law and custom. "Thank you," she said to Vincent, her voice thick with emotion. "You have given me my life back." "You never lost it," Vincent replied, squeezing her hand gently. "It was stolen from you, and now you have reclaimed it. That is all." They purchased supplies in town before beginning the long ride back to the Carmichael ranch. Josephine dreaded the confrontation that was surely coming, but with Vincent beside her and a marriage certificate safely tucked into her bag, she felt a courage she had not known she possessed. They arrived back at the ranch just as the sun was setting. Carmichael was waiting on the front porch, his face purple with rage. "Where the hell have you been?" he roared, storming down the steps toward them. "You stole my property, Emmett. I will see you hanged for this." "I stole nothing," Vincent replied calmly, dismounting and helping Josephine down from her horse. "Josephine is my wife now, legally married before Father Miguel in Casa Grande. I have the certificate to prove it." "Your wife," Carmichael sputtered, his eyes bulging. "You conniving son of a—" "I paid good money for her. 200 acres and 300 head of cattle. You paid her father for land and cattle," Vincent corrected. "A human being cannot be bought or sold, no matter what arrangement you made. Josephine is free to marry whomever she chooses, and she chose me." "This is not over," Carmichael snarled. "I will go to the sheriff. I will take this to a judge. You cannot just steal what I paid for." "Go to whomever you wish," Vincent said, his voice hard. "But you will find that the law is on our side. We are married, and that is the end of it." For a moment, Josephine thought Carmichael might actually attack them. His fists were clenched, and he was breathing hard like a bull about to charge. But Vincent stood his ground, positioning himself slightly in front of Josephine in a protective stance. Finally, Carmichael spat at Vincent's feet. "Get off my property, both of you. Take your things and get out. You are finished here, Emmett. I will make sure you never work in this territory again." "That suits me just fine," Vincent replied. "I have had my fill of working for men like you." Rosa had already packed both Vincent's belongings and Josephine's trunk, having anticipated exactly this outcome. Within an hour, they had loaded everything into a wagon that Vincent claimed as partial payment for wages owed. Carmichael was still cursing and threatening from the porch as they drove away, with Rosa waving a tearful goodbye from the kitchen door. "Where will we go?" Josephine asked as the ranch disappeared behind them in the gathering darkness. "I know a place," Vincent replied. "About 20 miles east of here, there is a small valley with good water and grazing land. The owner died last year, and his widow moved back east. She has been trying to sell the property for months. I have been in correspondence with her lawyer, and we had tentatively agreed on a price. With the money I have saved, I can make it work." "We can make it work," Josephine corrected gently. "We are partners now, are we not?" Vincent glanced at her, and even in the dim light she could see the warmth in his expression. "Yes, I suppose we are." They camped that night under the stars, maintaining a respectful distance as they settled into their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. Josephine lay awake for a long time, watching the embers glow and listening to the night sounds of the desert. Her life had changed so dramatically in such a short time that she could barely process it all. A month ago, she had been her father's daughter. 2 days ago, she had been Carmichael's possession. Now she was Vincent Emmett's wife, a woman with agency and autonomy, even if the marriage was not yet a true union in all senses. "Vincent," she called softly across the darkness. "Yes, are you awake?" "Obviously," he replied with a hint of amusement in his voice. "I just wanted to say again how grateful I am. I know this is not what you planned for your life." "Plans change," Vincent said. "Sometimes for the better. Do you think we can make a real go of it? The ranch, I mean." "I do. It will be hard work, especially at first." "But I am not afraid of hard work, and I suspect you are not either." "No," Josephine agreed. "I am not afraid of hard work. I am afraid of other things, but not that." "What are you afraid of?" Vincent asked gently. Josephine considered the question. "I am afraid of being a burden to you. I am afraid that you will regret this decision. I am afraid that I do not know how to be a wife, not a real one." "You are not a burden," Vincent said firmly. "As for regrets, I have none. And being a wife or a husband is not something anyone truly knows how to do until they do it. We will figure it out together." His words comforted her, and Josephine finally drifted off to sleep with a small smile on her face. The next few days were spent traveling to the valley Vincent had mentioned and meeting with the lawyer to finalize the purchase of the property. It was a modest spread, about 50 acres with a small but sturdy house, a barn, and access to a reliable creek. The previous owner had left behind some basic furniture and equipment, which made the transition easier. Josephine threw herself into making the house livable, scrubbing years of accumulated dust and grime, mending curtains and organizing the kitchen. Vincent worked from dawn to dusk, repairing fences, checking the irrigation system, and beginning the process of acquiring livestock. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, too exhausted for much conversation but comfortable in the silence. One evening, about 2 weeks after they had moved onto the property, Josephine gathered her courage to broach a subject that had been on her mind. "Vincent, we need to talk about our arrangement." He looked up from the piece of leather he was mending. "All right. When you proposed this marriage, you said I would not have to be your wife in all ways, that it would be my choice what happened next." "That is still true," Vincent said carefully. "I have not changed my mind about that." "What if I wanted things to change?" Josephine asked, her cheeks flushing but her voice steady. "What if I wanted this to be a real marriage?" Vincent set down his work, giving her his full attention. "Why would you want that?" "Because I admire you," Josephine said honestly. "Because you are kind and honorable and hard-working. Because when I imagine my future, I find myself wanting to share it with you truly. Because I think I might be falling in love with you, Vincent Emmett, and I wanted you to know." The silence that followed seemed to stretch on forever. Josephine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Vincent could hear it. Had she misread the situation? Had she made a terrible mistake in being so forward? But then Vincent stood and crossed the porch to kneel beside her chair. He took both of her hands in his hazel eyes intense and sincere. "Josephine, I have been trying not to hope for this," he said softly. "I did not want to pressure you, or make you feel obligated. But the truth is, I started falling for you the moment I saw you standing in your father's parlor, holding your head high despite everything that was happening. These past weeks, getting to know you, working beside you, building this life together, have only deepened those feelings. I love you. I think I have loved you almost from the start." Tears spilled down Josephine's cheeks, but they were tears of joy this time. "Then why have you been keeping such distance?" "Because I wanted you to come to me freely, if you came at all," Vincent replied. "You have had your choices stolen from you too many times already. I would not add to that by imposing my own desires." "You are the most remarkable man I have ever known," Josephine whispered, cupping his face in her hands. "May I kiss you?" Vincent asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please," Josephine breathed. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as though they were both afraid of breaking the spell. But then it deepened, becoming something more passionate and urgent. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Vincent's eyes were dark with desire. "I want you to know that I will never hurt you," he said seriously. "I will never force you or demand anything you are not ready to give. If you need more time, I understand." "I've had enough time," Josephine replied, standing and pulling him to his feet. "I want to be your wife in every way, Vincent, tonight." He searched her face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he swept her up into his arms, carrying her inside to the bedroom they had been using separately until now. That night, they came together as husband and wife in truth, and Josephine discovered a passion and tenderness she had never imagined possible. In the months that followed, their love only grew stronger. They worked the ranch together, building it up slowly but surely. Vincent proved to be an excellent rancher, with an instinct for cattle and land management that served them well. Josephine discovered she had a talent for breeding chickens and growing vegetables, and their small operation became increasingly profitable. They made friends among the neighboring ranchers, who welcomed them into the community. No one questioned their marriage or asked uncomfortable questions about how they had met. To everyone who knew them, Vincent and Josephine Emmett were simply a young couple working hard to build a life together. And that was enough. One day in early spring, about 8 months after their wedding, Josephine woke feeling queasy and exhausted. She tried to hide it from Vincent, not wanting to worry him, but he noticed immediately. "You have been ill for 3 days now," he said with concern. "I am taking you to see Dr. Williams in town." "I do not need a doctor," Josephine protested weakly. "Humor me," Vincent insisted, already hitching the horses to the wagon. Dr. Williams was a kindly man in his 60s who had been practicing medicine in the territory for over 30 years. He examined Josephine thoroughly, asked several pointed questions, and then smiled broadly. "Well, young lady, you are not ill at all. You are with child. I would estimate you are about 2 months along. Congratulations." Josephine stared at him in shock, her hand instinctively going to her still flat stomach. A baby, indeed, a healthy one by all indications. "You should expect to deliver sometime in early November, I would say." Vincent looked like he might faint from the news. "Are you certain?" he asked Dr. Williams. "As certain as I can be," the doctor replied, chuckling at Vincent's expression. "I have delivered enough babies in my time to know the signs. Take good care of your wife, young man. Make sure she gets plenty of rest and good food." The ride home was quiet, both of them processing the news. Finally, Vincent pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face Josephine. "How do you feel about this?" he asked carefully. "I know we have not been married long and we are still getting the ranch established." "I am happy," Josephine said, surprised to realize it was true. "Terrified but happy. What about you?" A slow smile spread across Vincent's face, transforming his entire expression. "I am more than happy. I am overjoyed. You are going to be a wonderful mother, Josephine. And you will be a wonderful father," she replied, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "Our child is very lucky." Vincent pulled her close, holding her gently. "I am the lucky one. You have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A home, a purpose, a family. You are worth more than all the land and cattle in the world, Josephine. You are worth more than all of it." The words echoed something Vincent had said months ago, during one of their late-night conversations on the porch. Josephine had mentioned the 200 acres and 300 cattle her father had received for trading her away, and Vincent had grown angry on her behalf. "You are worth so much more than that," he had insisted. "You are worth more than all of it combined, and anyone who cannot see that is a fool." Now, with his hand on her stomach and their future stretching out before them, those words took on even deeper meaning. She was not property to be traded. She was not a burden or an obligation. She was loved, valued, and cherished for exactly who she was. The pregnancy was not easy. The Arizona heat was oppressive that summer, and Josephine struggled with the physical demands of her changing body while still trying to maintain the household and garden. Vincent did everything he could to help, taking over many of the heavier tasks and insisting she rest frequently. His solicitude was touching, if occasionally overbearing. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Josephine protested one afternoon when Vincent physically carried her to a chair after finding her weeding the garden in the midday sun. "You are precious cargo," Vincent replied, unrepentant. "And I will not risk anything happening to you or the baby." In November, when the contractions began, Vincent rode like fury to fetch Dr. Williams. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Vincent paced outside the bedroom like a caged animal, occasionally trying to burst in to check on Josephine despite Rosa's attempts to keep him out. The older woman had arrived a week earlier to help with the birth, and she proved invaluable in keeping everyone calm and focused. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry pierced the air. Vincent froze, his heart in his throat, waiting for some indication of what had happened. Rosa emerged a few minutes later, her face wreathed in smiles. "You have a son, Vincent, a big, healthy boy. And your wife is tired but well." Vincent did not wait to hear more. He rushed past Rosa into the bedroom where Josephine lay propped up against the pillows, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket, and Vincent approached slowly, almost reverently. "Meet your son," Josephine said softly, pulling back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. Vincent sank down onto the edge of the bed, his eyes filling with tears as he looked at the baby. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You did amazingly, Josephine. I am so proud of you. Would you like to hold him?" Josephine asked, carefully transferring the baby into Vincent's arms. Vincent held his son with the utmost care, as though the child were made of the finest porcelain. The baby's eyes opened briefly, revealing a slate blue color that would likely change in time, and Vincent felt his heart expand in ways he had never imagined possible. "What should we name him?" he asked Josephine. "I was thinking Samuel," Josephine replied, "after my grandfather." "Samuel Vincent Emmett." "Samuel," Vincent repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Samuel. The first few months of parenthood were challenging but joyful. Samuel proved to be a good baby overall, though he had his fussy moments. Josephine took to motherhood with the same determination and grace she brought to everything else. And Vincent was a devoted father, always willing to walk the floor with a crying baby or change a soiled diaper. As Samuel grew from an infant into a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Vincent's reputation as an honest and skilled rancher spread, and he was able to acquire more land and cattle. Josephine's vegetable garden expanded into a profitable sideline, with folks coming from miles around to buy her produce. When Samuel was 2 years old, Josephine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl in the spring of 1882. They named her Clara Rose, and she had her mother's auburn hair and her father's hazel eyes. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch flourished, the children grew, and Vincent and Josephine's love deepened with each passing year. They had their challenges, of course. There were droughts and difficult winters, illnesses and injuries, disagreements and frustrations. But through it all, they faced everything together as partners and equals. Josephine sometimes thought about her father, wondering if he ever regretted what he had done. She had sent him one letter after Samuel was born, informing him that he was a grandfather, but he had never replied. Eventually, she made peace with the fact that she might never have a relationship with him again. Vincent's love and the family they had built together filled any void that might have existed. One evening, when Samuel was 5 and Clara was 3, the family was sitting together on the porch watching the sunset. Samuel was practicing his letters on a small slate, his tongue stuck out in concentration. Clara was playing with a rag doll Josephine had made for her. Vincent had his arm around Josephine's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth contentedly. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked softly, so as not to disturb the children. "More than I ever thought possible," Josephine replied honestly. "When I think about where I was 6 years ago, being traded like property and facing a future of misery, and then I look at this, at us, at our children and our home, it feels like a miracle." "You made your own miracle," Vincent said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You had the courage to grab hold of the chance I offered and make something beautiful out of it. That was all you." "It was us," Josephine corrected. "Together." "Together," Vincent agreed. As if sensing the moment, Samuel looked up from his slate. "Papa, when I grow up, will I have a ranch like this one?" "If you work hard and make good choices, you can have anything you want," Vincent replied. "But this ranch will be yours and your sister's someday, along with any other children your mother and I might have." "I want to be a rancher just like you," Samuel declared, puffing out his little chest. "And I want to grow vegetables like Mama," Clara added. Not to be outdone by her brother, Vincent and Josephine exchanged amused glances over their children's heads. "You can be anything you want to be," Josephine told them both. "That is the gift your father and I want to give you most of all, the freedom to choose your own path." That night, after the children were tucked into bed, Vincent and Josephine sat up talking as they often did. They discussed plans for expanding the herd, thoughts about building a larger barn, and whether they should hire additional help for the busy season. But underneath, the practical conversation was a current of deep contentment and abiding love. "I need to tell you something," Vincent said eventually, his tone becoming more serious. Josephine looked at him with concern. "What is it?" "I ran into someone in town last week. Jack Morrison, who used to work on the Carmichael ranch. He told me that Carmichael died about 3 months ago. Heart failure, apparently." Josephine absorbed this information quietly. She felt no particular satisfaction or sorrow at the news, just a sort of distant relief that the man could no longer hurt anyone else. How do you feel about that? Vincent asked, watching her carefully. Mostly, I just feel grateful, Josephine replied. Grateful that I escaped when I did. Grateful that you were there to help me. Grateful for everything that has come after. Carmichael was a cruel man, and I am sure there are people mourning him who saw a different side. But for me, his death is just the closing of a chapter that was already finished long ago. You are an extraordinary woman, Vincent said, pulling her close. Do you know that? I am just ordinary, Josephine protested. I simply refuse to accept a life that was unacceptable. That is what makes you extraordinary, Vincent insisted. You never gave up, never stopped fighting for something better. You inspire me every single day. Over the next several years, the Emmett Ranch continued to grow and prosper. Vincent's hard work and careful management paid off, and they were able to hire 3 steady ranch hands to help with the cattle. Josephine's garden became so popular that she started supplying vegetables to the general store in Casa Grande, providing a steady additional income. When Samuel was 8 and Clara was 6, Josephine gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Thomas and Elizabeth. The arrival of 2 babies at once was chaotic, but the older children stepped up to help, and somehow the family managed to adjust to the new dynamic. The territory around them was changing too. More settlers were arriving every year, and towns were growing larger and more established. Talk of statehood for Arizona was becoming increasingly common, though it would be many years yet before that dream was realized. Through all the changes, both personal and societal, Vincent and Josephine's relationship remained the bedrock upon which everything else was built. They had their disagreements, certainly. There were times when Vincent's overprotectiveness grated on Josephine's independent spirit, and times when Josephine's stubbornness frustrated Vincent's practical nature. But they had learned to communicate honestly and work through conflicts with respect and love. One particular argument stood out in both their memories. It happened when Samuel was 12 and had expressed interest in joining a cattle drive to help earn money. Vincent was inclined to allow it, seeing it as a valuable learning experience for their son. Josephine was adamantly opposed, feeling Samuel was too young for such a dangerous undertaking. He is just a boy, Josephine had insisted, her voice tight with worry. Cattle drives are dangerous. Men get hurt or killed. I will not risk our son. I was doing ranch work at his age, Vincent had replied, trying to remain calm. He needs to learn these skills, and he is old enough now. You are not his only parent, Josephine had shot back. I get a say in this too. The argument had escalated until finally Vincent had thrown up his hands in frustration and stalked out to the barn. Josephine had stood in the kitchen, shaking with anger and fear, unsure how to bridge the gap that had suddenly opened between them. It was Samuel himself who had resolved the situation. He had approached each parent separately, explaining that while he did want to go on the drive, he understood his mother's concerns. He suggested a compromise. He would wait 1 more year, and in the meantime, he would take on more responsibilities around the ranch to prove he was mature enough to handle the cattle drive when he turned 13. Both Vincent and Josephine had agreed to this solution, and more importantly, they had apologized to each other for letting the disagreement become so heated. We are supposed to be partners, Josephine had said, holding Vincent's hands. That means we make decisions together, even difficult ones. You are right, Vincent had agreed. I should have listened to your concerns more carefully instead of dismissing them. Samuel is your son too, and your fears for his safety are valid. The incident had actually strengthened their relationship, teaching them both important lessons about communication and compromise. When Samuel finally did go on his first cattle drive at age 13, both parents were supportive, and he returned home safely with a new maturity and confidence that made them proud. Clara, meanwhile, had developed a real talent for working with horses, and by age 14, she was helping to train the ranch's mounts with a skill that impressed even the most experienced hands. The twins, Thomas and Elizabeth, were as different as night and day. Thomas was quiet and bookish, more interested in reading and numbers than ranching. Elizabeth was a tomboy who followed her older siblings around and insisted on being involved in everything. Vincent and Josephine encouraged all their children to pursue their interests, never forcing them into predetermined roles. As the children grew older and more independent, Vincent and Josephine found themselves with more time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would take long rides together across their land, marveling at how far they had come from those desperate days when they had first fled the Carmichael ranch. "You ever regret it?" Josephine asked during one such ride, when they had stopped to water the horses by the creek that ran through their property. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on all the responsibility and complications that came with it." Vincent looked at her incredulously. "How can you even ask that? You and our children are the best things that ever happened to me. I have never regretted a single moment, not even the difficult ones. I just worry sometimes that you gave up your dreams for me," Josephine admitted. "You talked about wanting to ranch alone, to build something on your own terms. Instead, you got an instant family and all the obligations that came with it." Vincent dismounted and helped Josephine down from her horse, then took both her hands in his. "Listen to me carefully, because I want you to hear this and believe it. You did not derail my dreams. You became my dream. The life we have built together, the family we have created, the partnership we share, this is so much better than anything I imagined for myself. I love you, Josephine Emmett. I loved you when I married you to save you from Carmichael, and I love you even more now after all these years together. That will never change." Tears welled up in Josephine's eyes. Even after all this time, Vincent could still make her heart flutter with his words. "I love you too, so very much." They stood by the creek, holding each other as they had countless times before, and Josephine felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unlikely circumstances that had brought them together. What had started as a desperate escape plan had blossomed into the deepest, most fulfilling love she could have imagined. Time continued its inexorable march forward. Samuel grew into a fine young man who did eventually take over much of the day-to-day management of the ranch, allowing Vincent to slow down a bit as he entered his 40s. Clara shocked everyone by falling in love with a young lawyer from Casa Grande, a match that seemed unlikely until everyone saw how happy they made each other. Thomas, true to his nature, went east to study accounting and business management, with plans to return and help manage the financial side of the ranch operation. Elizabeth declared her intention to become a teacher, wanting to help establish schools in the growing communities throughout the territory. Vincent and Josephine became grandparents when Samuel married a sweet girl named Margaret, and they had a daughter they named Josephine, after her grandmother. The cycle of life continued, and the ranch that Vincent and Josephine had built from almost nothing became a legacy for future generations. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Vincent planned a special surprise for Josephine. He had saved money secretly for months, and he used it to commission a beautiful piece of jewelry from a craftsman in Tucson. A silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a tiny ranch,